Hey everybody, it's me, the Real Kid BC, and, well, I'm sad to inform everybody that, a large slash very famous and well-known network that has cartoons on it has, well, I don't want to say died because, it's a network, but, it's no longer around anymore. And I'm sure people already know exactly what I'm talking about. Yeah, I'm talking about Cartoon Network. So I'm not really gonna talk about the downfall of Cartoon Network necessarily. There are other people that are better suited to do that than myself. But I will talk about the impact of Cartoon Network, and also, obviously, I will talk about possible shows that I think were inspired by other shows from Cartoon Network's past. So yeah, um, so yeah, this is gonna be about the impact of Cartoon Network. So Cartoon Network originally started in 1992, and originally it used to air mostly Hanna-Barbera cartoons, and I don't need to explain Hanna-Barbera cartoons if you know anything about, well, Cartoon Network. Um, Obviously, Hanna-Barbera was stuff like, Scooby-Doo and the Flintstones and the Jetsons, and so on. Hanna-Barbera made a lot of cartoons. We'd be here all day if I listed all of them, alright? Um, but yeah, cartoons, most of the cartoons on Cartoon Network at the time, when the network originally started, were just Hanna-Barbera cartoons. It wasn't until just a couple years later that um, Cartoon Network actually would get their own original programming, and it was like around, well, no, it was like late '90s, early 2000s is pretty much when that actually started. So yeah, actually, I said that's a little while later, but no, that's more than just a little while later. But yeah, whatever. But yeah. Anyway, Cartoon Network got its original programming. Again, like I said, during the late '90s, early 2000s. And the shows that people will know about or remember from this time period are obviously shows like the Pop-Up Girls, Dexter's Lab, Johnny Bravo, and Ed, Ed and Eddie. Some of the first cartoons on Cartoon Network. And the Pop-Up Girls and Dexter's Lab were both massive hits for Cartoon Network. Johnny Bravo was, it was somewhere in the middle. It was it was popular, sure, certainly, but it wasn't as popular as Dexter's Lab or Powerpuff Girls, from my recollection, anyway. Um, and then you have Ed and Eddie, which Ed and Eddie is interesting because at first it wasn't as popular as Dexter or the Powerpuff Girls, but as time went on, it actually ended up getting more popular than those two shows. I feel, at least a little bit, anyway. Um, But yeah, as time went on after that, Cartoon Network, they just had their own original programming. Heck, they even had comics for their cartoons. Though that did start in that same era, of course. So yeah, again, late 2000s, sorry, early 2000s, late 90s. Um, and one of the things that Cartoon Network was known for, and I would say this is obviously one of the huge things that Cartoon Network was known for, um, was having their cartoons interact outside of the shows themselves. Um, like, you would have multiple bumpers where the characters are interacting with each other, just hanging out, going on dates, just riding around in their cars, having conversations, right? Or maybe just hanging out on the bus, having conversations, just sharing an awkward moment at right, at the laundromat, so on and so forth. Um, Cartoon Network was, in my opinion, they were better than Nickelodeon when it came to having their characters cross over. Nickelodeon had and still have their characters cross over almost all the time, but in my opinion, Cartoon Network just did it slightly better. Um, and these characters basically felt like real people at that point because, they crossed over so much and so often, and they had these interesting interactions in these conversations, and in these interesting friendships and petty rivalries sometimes. um, you know, it got to a point where Cartoon Network literally created their own city called CN City, for all these cartoons to essentially live in, which I always thought was really cool. I guess you could say it's like, it's kind of like the whole multiverse thing that, got really popular for a while. But before it got really popular, Um, but, though not entirely because, it's not all like, it's not like all these cartoons were just, coming through portals. They were in the same universe, you know? And that's one of the things about Cartoon Network that I liked. Sure, they technically did the multiverse thing, but at the same time they really didn't. Because, all the characters, they inhabited the same universe, and it was very cohesive, Heck, I remember during the summer, they even had a concert. Yeah, they literally had a whole concert in Cartoon Network City. Um, Sorry, CNC. Well, CN stood for Cartoon Network. Yeah, not a very subtle name there, but anyways, yeah, which was really cool. I like that. Um, and they had all of these holiday bumpers for Halloween and Christmas and Thanksgiving and so on and so forth. Um, and that's one of the reasons why people loved Cartoon Network. Like Cartoon Network left a massive impact because the characters actually felt more like people than just cartoons. They hung out, they bickered, they laughed, they cried, and so on. They all inhabited the same universe, as far as CN City was concerned. And, well, all the multiple crossovers, so on and so forth. And most of these shows, they inspired shows from later, if we're being honest here. Yeah, right. And a lot of a lot of writers were inspired by said shows, and a lot of writers, a lot of artists, and a lot of people nowadays making cartoons, were straight up inspired by those said cartoons. Um, like on some level, I do feel like, right. I do feel like shows like Regular Show, where, a bunch of crazy things happen and it's just two guys hanging out, was, slightly inspired by Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends, where, it's two dudes hang out and they get into a bunch of insane shenanigans on the daily. Not entirely, just a little bit, because, those two shows are fairly different from each other. Um, and then you also had shows like, um, then you also had shows like Chowder, which was, comedy gold, and Billy and Mandy, which was, well, dark comedy and so on. So, yeah. And then you also had shows that not really many people talk about, like Juniper Lee, which was a very interesting fantasy show. Actually, kind of reminded me of Jake Long a little bit, interestingly enough. Yeah, it's a show about a girl and all these magical creatures. Honestly, I thought it was pretty neat. Not enough people talk about it. So yeah. Not to mention the fact that Cartoon Network also had, it had a very diverse lineup of shows. Shows that were goofy, shows that that didn't really have a story, shows that were serious, shows that did have a story, shows that were short, shows that were long, shows that had dark comedy, shows that were fairly whimsical in nature, shows that were set in modern suburbia, or shows that were set in the past or even the future, in a fantasy setting, and so on and so forth. And that's another really good thing about Cartoon Network, the variety of different shows that people could watch back then. So yeah, I'm trying to think of shows that may have been inspired by other shows. Oh well, I can't really think of of too many, sadly. Maybe a few here and there, but Right. Also, I would like to point out, we used to have these DC cartoons. For anyone that knows what I'm talking about Detective Comics. They used to have these DC cartoons on Cartoon Network all the time, and it makes sense because, Cartoon Network is owned by Warner Brothers, so yeah. And that was another big thing about Cartoon Network for me, that they, had these DC characters that I was familiar with, like Batman and Superman and Wonder Woman and Green Lantern and so on. And they also had characters from DC that I weren't familiar with at the time, like Blue Beetle and Bawana Beast. So, yeah. So, yeah. And I got introduced to those characters. Well, yeah. And Animal Man and Plastic Man. But, yeah. Yeah. Cartoon Network inspired many artists today, and it's because Cartoon Network inspired said artists that we do have a lot of actually good and really compelling and really interesting cartoons and interesting characters and interesting worlds even today. Even if not all the shows are perfect or the best thing ever, still there are good cartoons out there. It's not like they don't exist. And that's partially because they were heavily inspired by Cartoon Network and the people that made them, and all the artists who I feel people should support in their time of need, if they can. Of course. You don't have to if you don't want to, it's fine. Or if you just financially can't, that's also fine. Just saying, you should still support these great artists whenever you can, if you can. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. And I have a lot of nostalgia for Cartoon Network. Yeah, and it's just sad to see them go. It really is. I'm not going to cry over it. I'm not going to make a huge deal about it. But it really is sad that, Cartoon Network, just this huge part of our childhood, it just no longer, it's just no longer as prominent as it used to be, and it's basically gone at this point. It really is a shame. Oh well. But yeah. Cartoon Network had a massive impact, and that will never be forgotten, ever. No matter where you go or who you talk to. Whether it's inside the cartoon community or outside the cartoon community, or inside the animation community or outside the animation community, or outside of the animation community / artist community as a whole. It had a massive impact, and now it's leaving a massive hole. Oh well. But yeah, that's all I got for today. In the comment section, if you feel the same way I do about the departure of Cartoon Network, please say so in the comment section. What were your favorite shows on Cartoon Network? What were, to you, the best things about Cartoon Network? And are there any shows that you feel like inspired the shows of today from Cartoon Network's past? Please say so in the comment section. And yeah, if you want all the important stuff, please check the description. That's where all of the important stuff usually is. So, yeah. And that's all I got. This has been the Real King of BC, signing out. Have a nice day, people.